Today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners, who for more than 25 years have successfully delivered interim and permanent leadership talent to transform businesses. To hire the talent you need to enable your business to thrive, visit www.progressotalent.com today. Stephanie Eltz is CEO and co-founder of Doctify, the review platform purpose-built for the intricacies of healthcare. She launched Doctify in 2015 with co-founder Shuman Sahar when they were working as surgeons in the NHS. Their light bulb moment came when Stephanie was dealing with a medical issue and struggling to find a specialist online she trusted. At the same time, Shuman was supporting an ill relative and finding it difficult to find the right clinician for them. They felt lost and anxious, not knowing who to turn to. They knew something needed to change, so decided to do something about it. Passionate about the idea of using technology to add greater transparency to the sector, Stephanie and Shuman developed Doctify. So what's the story behind the story? Without further ado, let's get into it. Stephanie Eltz, welcome to the Extrology podcast. It's great to have you as our guest here this morning. And as is customary with all things Extrology, before we jump into and really dive into the experiences that you've enjoyed from a career perspective, we like to start with those early days. So for the benefit of listeners, it would be great if we could start with childhood. Tell our audience, if I could ask you to, where you grew up and therefore what childhood was like for you.
So, well, that's so fun. Like, no one has asked me that for such a long time. I'm sure I've had a therapy session in the past where we spoke about it. But I grew up in Vienna, Austria, with two siblings. A sister is very close to me in age and a brother. And I went to a French international school. So it was really exciting because I grew up in this like beautiful, romantic city. And, you know, Vienna is quite small. But then I was in this international school with kids from all over the world. And it was very French. So it was really exciting to have this international upbringing in a city like Vienna.
Which must be fascinating. What excited you about that early experience, to have such a range of cultures and experiences at a relatively early age is quite unusual. That must have been a fantastic experience. What did you gain for it, do you think?
So essentially, I obviously didn't question it. I just thought it's normal because
it just is, right? It's just, you don't know any different, do you? I suppose it just is what it is.
Yeah, and I started in school when I was 4 years old, and we had different, ethnic origin, skin colors, and it was so normal. And it's only when I was much older and I did I think a summer school in America that I realized that it's not that normal that people from all over the world come together, and I sort of never questioned that in a way. And it's in America that I saw that people sort of went in separate groups, and that was it was a really, really eye-opening for me, and I'm very grateful for having grown up like that, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, it does. So who were your heroes as a child? Who did you look up to?
It sounds very predictable, but I looked up to my grandmother. I never followed a media star or anything like that, but my grandmother was someone, and I still look up to her. I think I look up to her because of her personality. She's just so kind. I unbelievably selfless and kind. And I just wanted to be like her, become like her. And I'm very different personality-wise. I think I'm also very kind, but I'm very fiery. And she was just quite calm and just radiant. And so, yeah, I still aim to grow into being her. I just can't wait to be a grandmother one day and just be like her. It's my goal in life.
What were your interests as a child?
So when I think back of my childhood, I always remember playing with my siblings. My sister is, I'm very close to her, and I think we should have never been separated in a way, because now she is back in Vienna and I'm in London. And so I just remember playing with my siblings, really. We always had our world, and it was my parents came and they maybe said hi and they fed us, and, were very nice. But But I just had this like amazing playful world with my siblings and especially my sister. We always had things to talk about, and I missed that. And when we're back together, it's like, this feels so right. I was never meant to not talk to her for hours every day. So I think that was a big part. Yeah, and then school was very academic. So there's a lot of school, very little sport, just a lot of studying all the time. Too much, maybe.
So when do you recall first taking an interest in, I mean, to refer to it as medicine or health care, I suppose, but medicine broadly. Do you recall a time that was this something that first started to pique your interest?
Yeah, I think it was around the age of 8 years old when I decided I wanted to be a doctor. And I think it's my parents were amazing in the sense of that they always asked us like, what is it you're going to do with your life? And they painted as like having a job is basically you pick a passion and then you follow it, And so it was like, what passion are you going to pick, So that question was around very early on. And I guess so I had to think about it and I decided I'm going to be a doctor, which isn't surprising because both of my parents are doctors.
Right.
And then also one other thing that my father always used to say, he said, you follow your passion and the money will come. Like it was a very, and I later realized that not every father said that. And so thinking of life like an adventure and then having the fact that you can pick this passion in life and just go for it fully was like something that I was always excited about. I couldn't wait to leave school as well.
Why? It sounds like you had such a rich school life by the sound of it. What was it that gave you that thought, that inclination?
Yeah, I just thought that life is getting more and more exciting and more adventurous and school was sort of restricting me, like the routine. I get bored very easily. And then just like being my own boss and having more and more responsibility. And I think I always felt like I'm an actor in my own movie and I have life in my hands and I just need to just do the best I can with it. And I think going to school from it was like 8:30 until 5 p.m. was just like restricting me in that adventure. So yeah, so life got better. I found every year after leaving school, it just got better and better.
I think it's a really interesting, your father's comment around follow your passion, I think is a really interesting debate because it's been a theme that has been well documented over time that, find something you're passionate about and then make that your pursuit. I think it's interesting as to clearly some people pick up on that passion at a relatively early age. I think for others, not being quite sure what you're passionate about, but then if you find something you're good at, that then because you're good at it, you become passionate about it because of the feeling that you get from the satisfaction of being good at something. It's not really quite nature nurture, but it's like what comes first? Do you get passionate about something, then you find your purpose, or do you find a purpose and then you get passionate about it? I think that's an interesting debate that a lot of people, I mean, I know from my own experience of having kids, they're not kids anymore, but having that conversation with them, it's like, well, what am I passionate about? It's an interesting debate.
Yeah, and if you think about it, my journey wasn't to being an entrepreneur wasn't straightforward because then I studied. The year after I left school, actually, I thought, well, I'm only going to be a doctor, and I chose this because my parents are, and I need to question it again. So I did try to study economics. Then I worked for the rest of the year in various places in the world, and then I went back to medicine because I really felt I needed that science aspect of it. So that was the first detour in my journey. Then I became a doctor. And then I became a surgeon like my father. And interestingly, my parents, when they realized that I was serious about becoming a doctor, they were not, I wouldn't say unhappy, but they were sort of like, I remember them saying to me, I think you should be an entrepreneur. And I was like, what is that even? I don't even know what that is. It's so far away from what I've seen. I think they saw that in me early on and they didn't think that becoming a doctor was the completely right thing for me, possibly. And then it's only after doing medicine for 10 years that, I co-founded Doctify and then ended up now running it for the last 5 years. So it was there were detours, but whatever I did, I was so passionate about what I did and I had the grit to stick it through, so that's the other thing. Like if you're really passionate, but then you change your passion every 6 months or 18 months, that's never going to get you anywhere. But I think it's about just starting somewhere and throwing yourself at it and just sticking through it. And then it's okay if it takes you somewhere else, right? I don't know. if your life is such a fascinating journey in a way.
What is it that you think they'd seen in you that had suggested to them that perhaps, I'm not suggesting they were of the view that you weren't right to become a doctor or a surgeon, but actually that entrepreneurship might have been a better path?
I have never asked them, but I think because I have two children now, and I see something in one of my children that I think they may have recognized in me, which is like the ability to think laterally all the time and to solve problems in a way that maybe others haven't thought about it, and to really get excited about that. So maybe they saw the lateral thinking, the desire to change, the ability to bring people on that journey with you. I think I don't want to sound silly, but maybe they saw a little bit of the ability of lead people in me. And they thought if I'm a doctor, only some of that will come out, and I may need something that I can build or some. Yeah, I think that's possibly what they saw.
I might be making a really dreadful, tenuous link here, but the thing that strikes me about surgery, and I've probably watched too many medical dramas to, this is where this kind of conclusion is arriving at me from, but actually that through surgery, that ability to, okay, so there is a process, there's a procedure, you follow that religiously, relentlessly, but respectfully, things can go wrong. So you need to be able to adapt, think on your feet, solve problems very rapidly, lead a group of people to help you to solve those problems. You can't do it all on your own. So actually there are traits that are consistent. And as I say, this could be a very tenuous link. I'm interested in your view, but are there traits, therefore, that as a surgeon, you could arguably apply to running a business?
Oh, absolutely. And I think these years of being a doctor, it's being a doctor is such a fascinating and demanding job, and you can never peak. You just constantly have to be evolved to be a better version of yourself in so many aspects, and the work ethic. And I mean, I think it prepares you really well for being an entrepreneur, but also I have utter respect for all my colleagues that, my best friends, they're all still in that job. And I just think I just have so much respect for it. It's such a fascinating career. And yes, you have to apply lateral thinking in a form of leadership. But the one thing that I think was lacking for me, especially in the UK, was the ability to really change your environment and improve the system. It's very, very difficult to do that as a doctor. So, and I think, on several occasions, I tried to change the system, my immediate system, my immediate, the department I work in, improve it, and that's very difficult. So you end up working in a very strict system, and I think the freedom you have as an entrepreneur to really make changes based on your own, desire to do them, and that's very liberating.
What was it about surgery that appealed to you?
I remember I didn't set out to wanting to be a surgeon, but I did my 5th year of medical school in Paris, and suddenly I was in an operating theater, and then I spent most of that year in an operating theater, and I got really close to that team, and it was like I entered that world, and hours were just like seconds to me. It was so fascinating, and still is. It's and that the fact that you are in this position where someone trusts their life or, their body part, whatever to you, it's just it's the most privileged thing to do. So it was fascinating and beautiful. And then also the teamwork around an operating table, I really enjoyed. So pretty much every aspect, and also the quietness, I later or just recently learned about flow activity in a way. If things are going well, surgery is like a flow activity. It's very quiet, and you're in the rhythm of doing something, and also, I mean, that sounds really crazy to people who don't have doctors as friends, but also the human body is the tissues. It's very beautiful as well. It's a beautiful art in some way. And obviously very stressful when things go wrong, but yeah, pretty much everything about it fascinated me.
Before we go into Doctify, had you shown any interest in running your own business, or you mentioned some of your study, but had you shown any interest in running your own business at any point through your life before Doctify became a thing?
Yeah, in that 1 year after medical school, after leaving school, I attempted to start a business, but then I decided to do medicine was bigger, and so I just abandoned that before it even started. And then within my work as a doctor, as a surgeon, you're due to engage in improvement projects, so I kept on picking them up and doing things. But again, like I remember there was one moment that I felt quite tough in a way. So I just give you an example how this can go. So we were doing a clinic in a hospital, and a big portion of our patients will need an X-ray during that clinic or after that clinic, and the X-ray department was really quite far away from where we did that particular clinic, and so you spend a lot of time explaining to the patient where to go, and it was like take a left or right, then go down that corridor, whatever. And if you didn't have time to do it, the nurses would do it outside. It was such a waste of time. So I went to some leader there, some manager, and I who was in charge. I said, "Can we please just stick a strip, like you have on, in certain airports where you just follow the strip, to departures or whatever." Because this would be so helpful for these patients who are often in pain walking down the corridors, so they don't get lost. And the answer I got was, "Let me take it up." Then no one came back to me. Then I followed up, and then I was told, "You should be explaining this to your patients, and there's absolutely no interest in doing this." And it was so frustrating because I could see that I was just here to execute my job, and like making changes was very difficult. And so I feel like with Doctify, we are doing such a good thing for so many patients. And if I want to do even more and even better or improve something, we can. And that's beautiful.
What was the inspiration? Where did the idea come from for Doctify?
So I was concerned about a mole I had. It's a very simple story, but I was concerned about a mole I had, and I thought, oh, this may be a melanoma. And I'm terrified of that. So I remember it was like a weekend, and then I had, Monday was coming, and I had that Friday off. And so I was like, I just want to have it removed on Friday. It's a very simple operation. I mean, I could have done it, but it's on my back, and also I need to send it off to histology. So I was like, I just want to go on Monday. I just want to get that organized. And then, but it was combined with a bit of like, I was concerned about it and stressed about it. And so I just found that journey as a patient very difficult to find someone who could do it and who's good at it. And so I was like, it's strange that it happens to me, someone who's quite connected. I'm a doctor, I should know, and I do know other people, but I'm still lost. And oh my God, how about people that have an even scarier situation and that are not connected? And so I really felt I want to solve this.
So how does that kind of nub of an idea, how does that become a business? Where do you even get started, or how did you even get started?
Yeah, so I discussed this with my co-founder, Shimon, and we just did a brainstorming session, and we bought this paper that we stuck onto the wall, and then, used these pens to build, this journey and like our solution. And they're pictures from that day. And these pictures, they come up in our company presentation. They're iconic because they see us like scribbling on the walls. And then at the end, I'm like half lying on the sofa, super tired. And it was like the beginning of it. And then you're like, right, so we know what we want to do, but like, you need money. And then we just solve one bit after the next. And you just, and it just continues like that. Like every day I wake up and I'm like, this is where I want to get to. And I just solve puzzles on the way to getting there.
And Schumann, you'd worked together, had you? You were working together at that point. One of my questions was going to be how the two of you met and subsequently became business partners.
Yeah, so he was sort of my team leader in that orthopedic team, actually at UCH in London, University College London Hospital. And so, yeah, we just become friends, and we never stopped talking. We just had so much to tell each other. And so it was a very natural journey to work together. And I think it was a very good decision to have done it together.
So you go from whiteboards or Post-its or drawing on a wall to thinking, okay, so if we're going to make this this is a business, we're going to need capital, we're going to need to raise. What sort of challenges did you face in those early days, and how did you overcome them?
So, I mean, the first obvious one was like raising the first capital, and it was still part of that .com boom era. So people were bullish, and so we found our early stage investors, to whom I'm super grateful. And then the said, we're gonna find some of that money for you, and that was the first challenge solved. And then we found a agency that did the first bit of the product, and off we went. And it was it was just so fascinating, and it was addictive. We didn't want to stop working in the end of the day, because we were building this amazing thing, and on the weekends and in between. And it's tough to literally like leave your desk at that stage.
It's exciting though, right? So what is it that you set out to achieve?
So I just wanted to solve that problem if anyone else was in my situation, and I kept my eyes on solving that. You have a healthcare scare, and you wanna go to a platform that helps you choose the right healthcare for yourself. That was like the first thing we wanted to solve. And then I remember within a few months, I drew something on the board, and I said, we want to become the most important site in the UK doing this. And that was a goal. And now I really believe we could, it will take some time, but I really believe we could build one of the most important global sites that solve this. And there's really, there's no global product out there doing it. So my goals have changed. I have, the vision is bigger now than it was at that point. But it's really good to go back to that problem and be like, that's what you want to solve. And yeah, I think my sort of use case of problem has changed a bit. In this summer, we had a very sad thing that happened to us, where unfortunately we lost a child in our baby was born, and then it passed away after a few weeks. And there was this point where the team consulted with a specialist that was in another country, and she was brilliant, like super specialist in this field. But I just wanted to speak to other specialists in this very, very niche field, and I just didn't know where they were. And at the end, she consulted with other specialists in Holland. And so she knew her network. And I think now the thing that I want to solve is bringing all these doctors in various countries together. So if you have even a niche problem, with the click of a button, you should find out those people that are focusing on solving that problem, or that are specialists in treating that problem. So that's like my new vision, is a bit more global. And I'm very excited to work on this, really.
Which is, I mean, first and foremost, I'm really sorry to hear of such a traumatic event. But I think that if I reflect on, you always naive perspective, but you imagine, I'm not a medical professional. I've got those in my family who are, but I'm certainly not. And you always imagine we put a lot of trust in those institutions and those the like of your profession. When there's a problem, you imagine, you go in, you ask, and you'll know. For whatever reason that might be, I think it's kind of, we're sort of hardwired into trust. So we therefore assume that if I go and ask my doctor this, they'll know the answer, or they'll know someone they can put me in touch with someone who can fix it for me. But actually, from what you're saying, even within the profession itself, which makes a lot of sense, it makes sense, but I never really thought of it that way, that actually that connectivity and that expertise is global, but actually there isn't a mechanism for readily being able to tap into that expertise. So what you're describing by way of a platform, that sounds incredibly beneficial, hugely beneficial, to allow and offer people the opportunity at oftentimes the very worst points in their lives, or very fearful times, very worrying, anxious times, to be able to get access, get resolution, or at least understand someone who can help them. That's a hugely compelling proposition.
Yeah. And often you actually trust your team or the doctors that you're in contact with, but it can be really reassuring to maybe speak to a second one, or just, when things get complicated, that can be a very, very nice thing. And the reviews on Doctify, they every time a patient reviews a doctor or a clinic and a hospital, we work with big hospital chains as well, they say what they have been treated for, or they say what disease they're suffering from. And so we build up this intelligence where you sort of know, not based on what the doctor may write in their profile, but based on real data, who is really doing what on a day-to-day basis, who has got the most reviews for doing this particular thing. And then the other thing we're doing, which I'm equally excited about, and it's something that we're going to push a lot in the next years, is that doctors say about other doctors what they think they're specializing in. And you sort of know every doctor has their sort of network of doctors around them, and they know where they would send their wife, their child, their partner to for what disease, because they've worked with people, they've operated with them, they've referred to them. And we're really trying to showcase that data. So at the end, if you have a problem, you should be able to find the clinicians, the specialists, the clinics that really deal with that problem. And that I'm so excited about that.
That's hugely compelling, isn't it? I guess that peer group review, and professionally acknowledged peer review, it becomes incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And all available at the touch of a button on a screen, in our hands, on our devices, whatever it may be.
Yes.
Goodness me.
Yeah, it's just all information available online. And yeah, I think on Doctify, it's some of it is related to the rating. And if you fall below a certain score, you should, that's very concerning. But really a lot about is related about describing who specializes in what. And that's very, very helpful when you need it.
Without asking you to break any, and you wouldn't anyway, but any trade secrets or commercially sensitive information. But the thing that strikes me is, though, that this is a really simplistic analogy that I draw once again. But if I look at previous episodes of Extrology, we had Peter Holton-Muhlmann, who's the founder of Trustpilot, for example, in an earlier episode. And that sense of that's a very different dynamic. But that I can't quite remember the specifics of the research, but I think there was, and I'm probably going to butcher this now, but that sense of, like, if you have a good experience, you tell 4 people. If you have a bad experience, you tell 12, and you compound that. So people are more inclined to talk about negative experiences very openly and share them widely, and particularly with the platforms that are now available us to spread those views, not always helpfully. So how do you kind of ensure the integrity, if you like, of the information that's being exchanged? You want it to be realistic, I understand that. You want it to be considered and thoughtful and well presented, well executed, but also how do you sort of ensure the integrity? That's the word that springs to mind. How do you ensure that integrity of the data that you're imparting and sharing to people?
Yeah, so we're doing everything we can to get our clients to embed that review link into all of their communication. We call it automation. I think this is so much effort goes into doing that. So you don't have that hand selection of who receives, who is giving a review. And this is working really, really well. I know that the reviews in healthcare are very different to the reviews in consumer products or, what Trustpilot is doing, all of that. They are much more positive because the reality is that the majority of doctors are really trying their best. And the vast majority of patients are very grateful for what the care they receive. So you don't have the same amount of negative reviews in healthcare as you have in other review sites. And that's known, and it's published by many, anyone collecting healthcare reviews. There's a lot of positive reviews, which is why I think the added information of what is this doctor doing really, that data about like describing a doctor in terms, the majority of reviews are about this disease. And that's so important because the ratings, they tend to not have as big of a difference as they have as they would have for consumer products or even traveling industry.
I can see that. I'm even reflecting on my own experiences and procedures that I might have had through my life. And I know, I'm the first to say one particular procedure springs to mind I would extol even to this day the virtues of the experience that I've had and the treatment that I enjoyed and how it transformed, what an impact that it had. So I agree with you. I can see how, and I think in my experience, I'm a glass half full kind of person, but in my experience, people are inherently good. The vast, vast, vast majority of people are inherently good. And I think if they've had a good experience, they want to help other people enjoy that good experience who might have been suffering in a similar way. So I can see what you're describing, certainly. If you reflect back on those early days of Doctify, with the benefit of hindsight, is there anything that you might have done differently?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that was interesting to me is that in medicine, there's a lot of people with empathy and, in general, very good people go into medicine, and of course not everyone, and and you also have bad people. But I think when we then moved into the business world, we weren't prepared for that, and I think a bit naive, because the business world does attract, there's more sociopaths, psychopaths, and I think, I don't know if I would change anything, but that was certainly a learning to be protective of what you do and select people very carefully. That was just something I think I would tell myself back then, starting it again. But you learn, and then you're fine. It's just different in medicine in that sense.
So what other lessons? You're 8 years this year, is that right? 8 years in? I'm trying to do the math.
Yeah, the company isn't sort of registered, but I would say it's 7 years.
7 years.
But when it really started, yes.
What other lessons have you learned along the way, do you think?
The most important one being that you have to stop and celebrate the small successes, especially when you're so ingrained with your vision, because it is endless. And it's not like you get to that place where you've now solved that vision and then that's when you're going to be happy. And that addictive passion can just make you so unaware, there's a big risk in not celebrating the small successes. But you have to, because it's many years. This journey is many years. If you build a sustainable, strong company, they don't usually happen overnight. Even if you look at the overnight phenomena, there's usually something that started a lot earlier. So you got to celebrate the small successes on the way. And you got to really, it sounds so cliched, you've got to enjoy the journey.
How do you ensure that you do celebrate? Because I agree with you. I think first and foremost, there's arguably no such thing as an overnight success. To your point, everything has started over. But actually, we live in a world where the expectation of overnight success is all pervasive. There is that sense of, I think I'm right in saying that, for example, when Instagram was acquired by Facebook, it was, 10, 11 people in a room and they paid $1 billion for it. And we all believe that we're all, well, that's the trick, right? So we're just, you start a company and you just make a lot of money. And, and that's what solves life's not like that. To your point, it is an awful lot of blood, sweat and tears, tremendous passion, tremendous hard work, energy, highs and lows. It's very reflective of, frankly, life, isn't it? Life is a series of highs and lows. So how do you make sure that you do just check in now and again and celebrate those small wins? Because it's very easy to kind of go, well, that should have happened because we worked really hard, but let's get on to the next bit.
It's a weakness of mine. I'm not very good at it. It's just I'm always moving on and on and on. And I think Shimon reminds me of it. He can say something that he just sometimes says, we're so lucky, just stop for a second, because I get wound up by something that hasn't worked or whatever. So he reminds me of it. And I, anytime someone asks me, what's your biggest takeaway? I say this because I constantly strive to get better at it. But I am not very good at it. I just constantly move on. But I loved the comparison of, I'm so bad at saying his name, but I think it's Mo Gavdat, the author of...
Is it Soul for Happy?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've read it. It's a fabulous book.
Yeah, and I've just listened to him once, and this podcast is really fascinated me. And he said, life is a bit like a walk through nature. When you walk through nature, you see a fallen tree and you see bushes and you see nature's not straightforward. It's very, it's a bit all over the place, but you're still happy in it because you expect it to be full of surprises and things that are, like a bush, it's not a geometrical thing. And yet in life, we sort of think that it's linear. But when you think of life similarly to a walk through nature where things come your way and you step over a branch and this is happening, then you just accept the flow more and you probably enjoy it more. as opposed to having this naive thinking that you will get to that place where everything is like linear and that's when you're going to be happy. You know, that picture helps me a lot.
To your point, I think that's interesting. Nature is very chaotic, isn't it? But actually, I think we have this interesting, if you like, debate, conflict within human psychology that we all crave certainty in varying degrees, but we all crave certainty. We get out of bed in the morning and, we believe we have that certainty that things will happen through our day, that this will happen, this will happen, this will happen, this will happen. But actually, none of us truly know. We can convince ourselves we absolutely know, but we don't. The one true constant is uncertainty. Everything is uncertain. And yet, so we have this conflict in our minds of we crave certainty, but we have uncertainty. And it's that uncertainty that gets us out of bed in the morning, but we seek that certainty all the time. It's a really interesting conflict that we try and wrestle with, I think, through our lives.
Yeah. And when you experience it truly, like when you go through, your first like real trauma and you realize that the important things in life are really not in your hands. Like, and I mean the really important things, your health, your loved one's health, things like that, then you have I think an option of either feeling really anxious about the next day and everything you have, or you feel a sense of calm. And I've spoken to people that have gone through, very significant trauma, at our like similar age to me and stuff. And that's what they all said independently. They said, when you really truly understand it, you get a sense of calm. Because if you can't really change the big things, then just like lay back a bit, like enjoy it, And yeah, and I think I have a bit more of that nowadays.
Was there a pivotal moment to which you'd attribute the success of Doctify you've enjoyed to date?
I think there was a very important phase over the last few years where we focused more on the software and the fact that we really wanted to make sure that our clients collect reviews from every patient. And we focused more almost to be a B2B software company than on our platform. And now I feel like things are so solid and that side of the business is doing really well. And we have the luxury to focus more on the platform, on how do we present this data to patients? How do we get more of that data? How can we improve the platform, make it more known? But I think that decision to focus more on the software for several years was a pivotal to where we are now, and will be pivotal to where we will be in 5 years.
What does a typical day look like for you? Is there such a thing as a typical day, and what might it entail?
So in at Doctify we have taken quite a few things from the hospital or medical world into how the business is sort of works or is being run, because Ben might have never worked for another company, a part of the NHS, and then as a doctor if you want. So one of the things that we do in the morning at 8:50, we all come together by now the company's in 5 markets, but we all come together in a digital room and we have a 10 to 15 minute sort of update meeting, teaching moment, or fun. Sometimes we do exercise. It really varies every day. And it's coming from what you have in trauma surgery, which are the trauma meetings. So you meet in the morning, that all the trauma surgeons meet and they say what's happened overnight, what's going to happen today. Sometimes there's a bit of teaching. And so we've taken that tradition. So I love it. And it's when people join, they're sort of, what is this? It's so strange. But then after like a few weeks, they're like, that makes so much sense. And so that's how we start the day. And then often I work from home. And I have a lot of digital meetings, and 2 days a week I'm in the office in Shoreditch, and it's a great space to be in.
What makes you angry?
Things that are unfair, like, make me really angry. If something's just unfair, either if it's unfair and it affects someone I care about or someone who works for us, and then I get very angry, or if it affects me or the company, that sort of thing makes me very angry. I think a big sense of morale and fairness and stuff like that.
What really excites you about the future?
Yes, I'm really driven about that vision of creating a site that is somehow connecting the medical world on a global scale and therefore serving patients. It's like something that I'm so excited about, and I'm convinced we're gonna make work.
It's such a, I think healthcare is such a fascinating, it's such an emotive subject, isn't it? I don't know if it's a uniquely British perspective, because we have this wonderful institution, the NHS, and we're fiercely protective of it. But it strikes me that at every turn, it's fraught with criticism. It's right at the front of the political debate. It's right at the front of the news agenda. We're constantly referencing other societies that we say, well, it's better there, or this bit's better, or this bit's not so good. It's such a debate, isn't it, around what works, what doesn't, what we can do better. There are rare occasions where we sit back and reflect. I mean, through COVID, for example, when people are stood out in the streets and applauding the NHS, but there are rare occasions where we kind of go, this is incredible. But actually, I wonder, is that something you'd seen globally, that there is that sense of, health is such an emotive subject? What can we do to improve it? That's just I suppose we could do a whole podcast on that debate in itself. Or what do you think we could do to make it better? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't even know where I'd start with something like that.
As a doctor, I spend time working either as a student or as an actual doctor in the healthcare system in the US, in France, and in Austria. And so I got a sense of it. And I think the difference between at least Austria and in France versus England is that, yes, it's always emotive because it's like the most important thing, really. But there's not as much criticism, there's a deep, deep trust, and they're very proud and trusting. And I felt, I know that in England, the NHS is, there's people are very proud of it. But I think the level of criticism that was there pre-COVID, I found very tough also working as a doctor. And I felt there was a lack of trust in the delivery at times. And I found this very difficult. And it was one of the reasons why I wanted to bring these reviews to life. Because the reality is when you then work in a clinic, and really the majority of doctors are doing their utter best every day. It's not an easy job. And they've gone into it because they really... And there's so many patients that you can help, and you go above and beyond, and they say thank you. And I just found that I wanted to bring these reviews to life to maybe also heal a bit of that relationship. I think COVID obviously has done a lot of good for that, but I do hope that there's more of that trust in the UK in the future for the delivery of care. But why? Not just because the doctors need it and all the healthcare professionals, my God, the nurses, the HCAs, but because if that is more present, it will attract more people to go into that profession and stay in that profession. So overall, everyone benefits. So I hope that Doctify does some of it, brings patients and doctors together using, and specialists together using, the voice of the patient, connect them using technology, but heal some of that broken relationship.
You mentioned when we first started talking as to the influence of your grandmother on your life and particularly through your childhood. But who has been the greatest influence on your career, would you say, and why?
I mean, I definitely Shimon and I influence each other every day, and we're so different. So I always get a new perspective from him. And then quite recently, we had some investment from a fund called Clean Ventures, a Dutch fund, and with it came the partner called Ben. And he had a few conversations with me that were very, I think will help me a lot to take my leadership to the next level. So he influenced me.
So who do you admire?
I mean, this is completely different in a way what I'm going to say, but I admire people that stand up for what they believe in. If you think about the Russia-Ukraine conflict, like people that stand up for what they believe in, even if it may not be the best for themselves and maybe even their families, people that just fight for their beliefs. I find that really amazing.
And you have a huge amount of energy, Stephanie. What is it that drives you?
the passion to solve, this particular problem of wanting to help other patients that are in the situation that I have been, and just thinking, my God, I could contribute, I could leave this world having helped patients or people that are in the same situation, needing to find answers, needing to find the right care in this particular moment. That really drives me, every morning.
So what does success mean to you?
It's not a state success, right? What does success mean to me? God, such a complicated question. I think it means maybe solving that problem for, really on an international level would be a business form of success. And on a personal level, I think just improving as a person, becoming more like my grandmother would be my personal success. It's just incredibly nice, selfless.
She sounds a wonderful character.
Yeah, my mother too. But my mother and I are more like, so he always, I want to be so calm and so much like my grandmother.
So what about away from work? Is there an away from work for you? And if so, how do you unwind and relax?
So I have these 2 children who are so cute and so fascinating. So spending time with them, I find really enjoyable. Not always, they can be really annoying, but most times. And then I really relax being in any form of water. So taking a bath is the best. So that swimming, that I do work out, but I just do it because I think it makes me happier, but it's not something I love.
And what about reading? Are you a reader? And if so, what are you reading currently? We love a book recommendation on Extrology. What are you reading currently?
I found that I didn't read Solve for Happiness, but I listened to it, and I found that one really helpful when I went through something very difficult. Like, it was a guidance. I kept on going back to it and listen to it again. I was like, it makes so much sense. Like, life is just up and down. It's not in your control. So that, I think, if you are going through something difficult, that is unbelievably helpful. And a part of that, I'm reading like awful fiction stuff. I read these like crime books that you buy on airports, and with like, people being stabbed and stuff like that, and like, like just fiction, and I really would not, I don't think I'm good at recommending those to anyone because they're not very.
But I guess it's an escape, right? It's an escape from, even if we can just drift off for a moment, it just takes you away from and allows the brain to just go somewhere else for a bit. Obviously, get a chance to refresh and recharge.
Exactly. And it's so good for your brain to just read some silly crime romantic or not romantic book. So good.
Absolutely. Looking back, what advice would you give your 21-year-old self?
I think, because I think you realize I'm quite passionate and so on, and so I can take things to heart, and I think someone said, "This too shall pass," which is such a great advice. Just don't take it so seriously, some of the things that happen or that you go through. So I would say that to myself, just because I was always pushing and driving on and experiencing things. So I don't need to give that advice to myself. But like, when things are not ideal or whatever, I think just stepping over it and moving on and just realizing it will pass is a good one.
So what does the future look like for you?
More of the same, but better, and just constantly improving my leadership and refining the vision. So really more of the same, I would say.
And where can people go to find out more about Doctify?
So, hopefully when you're going through a discovery journey yourself about like needing to see someone in the UK, even if you go and see someone, an NHS doctor in an NHS hospital, I hope when you Google like that you come across us. So you are on that journey and you're trying to understand where you're going, what you're doing, and hopefully you come across us because we have information for you. Otherwise, just on doctify.com and / whatever. If you're in any of the 5 markets, then it would be / Australia or Austria or Germany or Middle East and so on.
Fantastic. I think it's a wonderfully exciting time. I know that you'd There was an announcement earlier this week as to another significant raise that will take the company through that next stage of evolution and development. And I think it's a wonderful platform that you afford so many of us to really understand, or really help us to understand where best we can get the kind of care that we need. So it's a wonderfully compelling proposition, and I wish you and all your colleagues continued success, because there's great benefit to us all. So I congratulate you on the work to date. I look forward to seeing you continue to thrive and flourish, and really appreciate you taking the time out to spend with us today on Extrology and share that wonderful journey with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. And it was such interesting questions, unusual questions. Really nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening to today's Extrology podcast. I really appreciate your audience and ears. If you've enjoyed it, then why not hop onto iTunes and give us a review? I'd really appreciate anything that you might have to say. Any feedback always gratefully received, and look forward to hosting you next time. See you soon. Just a reminder, today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners. Visit www.progressotalent.com today for more information.